Welcome to our series on the book of Hosea. We're reading through it together. If you are watching right now live, I'd love to know about it. I'd love to know you're here. You can go ahead and comment on the comment section right over there. I would really appreciate hearing from you. Um, so, let's see. We are in Hosea chapters 8 and 9 today. Um, and um, These are hard chapters. I was reading these chapters and I found them to be difficult. There's not a lot of good news in them, and they're pretty brutal as far as the way that God feels toward Israel is very angry and very frustrated because people have rejected Him. Um, but I just want to give you a couple of my thoughts, and always remember that you don't ever take verses out of context, right? So, although right now we're in the midst of God expressing His judgment on Israel, just wait till we get to chapter 11. Things will be turned around in quite a pleasant and refreshing way. But as we do read about God's judgment, I'm hopeful that this will have an impact on our hearts. The impact I want it to have is that we would actually look at our sin and take it seriously. God does. God really takes our sin, our failures to love Him well seriously. And although He still loves us, He longs for us to return to Him when we are in sin in repentance. And that's a little bit of what we talked about on Tuesday. That God, in His anger, um, just longed mostly for His people to return to Him. He doesn't look for perfection in people. He doesn't look for empty religion. He looks for repentance and the people who want to actually know Him and be loved by Him. We've got some people on. It's good to see you, Emily. I'm glad you are here. It's great to see you. And let's see, this is Roby, but I'm not sure who this is. I'd love to know who this is if you want to let me know in the chat. I'm glad you're here, though. I'm glad you're watching along. I hope you guys are enjoying reading with me. This has been really good for me, just to be have the accountability with you all, to be reading on a regular basis, to be thinking about it. Me doing these videos helps me verbally process some of the thoughts I'm having about who God reveals Himself to be. And so I hope that they are also helpful to you. Let's jump in and talk briefly about what's going on in Hosea 8 and 9. In Hosea 8, God is pronouncing His judgment. And He gives this image in verse 7. He says, "They sow the wind, and they will reap the whirlwind." This is another way of God saying to the Israelites that, hey, you reap what you sow. The things you plant are the things you're going to harvest. And what they've been planting is fake religion and worship of other gods. And it's going to give them what those things give them, which is nothing and pain and agony. And the whirlwind is going to be far worse. It's like they might just sow the wind, but they're going to reap the whirlwind. They're going to feel the punishment, the pain of going towards those other things. In verse 8, in chapter 8, you see that in verse 2 that Israel is crying out to God, and they're saying, "Our God, we acknowledge you. We know you." And God's saying, "No, you don't know me. You don't know me because I know what you're doing when you leave these places. You might be saying one thing to my face, but then you're going and living a completely different way somewhere else." He continues this idea in verse 13. He says, "Though they offer sacrifices as gifts to me, and though they eat the meat, the Lord is not pleased with them." What it's saying is they just have this empty religion because they've been coming and doing their sacrifices. They've been coming and doing the things that God has commanded of them, but they've also been then just going next door and worshiping other gods, like this one that they mention in chapter. Where was it? I lost it. Um, I'm not seeing it right here, but it talks about them going to worship other gods, making idols for themselves of silver and gold. They talk about the golden calf. He refers to back to the golden calf that they made in the desert, and they've been doing that same kind of thing in the Promised Land. They're going to Assyria and to Egypt asking for their help rather than coming to the Lord, going to their enemies. We talked about that a little bit last time. Um, this is just the nature of Israel's heart, that they say things with their lips to the Lord, but they turn around and they do something else with their actions. And that should confront our hearts, I think, because if we're honest with ourselves, our hearts have the same tendency. We um, those of us who are Christians or who go to church, we want to say we follow the Lord, but we know that our hearts stray quickly. And so, what are we going to do when we stray? Are we going to just continue in this idolatry, or are we going to respond like Hosea calls us to in repentance? If we respond in repentance, that's just what the Lord expects of us. That's what the Lord longs for us. He longs for us to come back to Him. He is not a God who desires to just rain down punishment on us. He's really trying to call us back to Himself. And then in chapter 9, the main imagery is that the people of Israel are going after other gods. It says, you love the wages of a prostitute at every threshing floor. What it's saying is, like, you go to these, like, you're like a prostitute. You're going to these other gods, hoping that they're going to give you the things you want. Just like we do, right? We go to other things thinking that that thing or that thing that is not God is going to give me what I want, is going to make me happy, is going to give me joy. And he's saying Israel just thinks that the gifts that they're getting from this, the things they're getting from this, are going to satisfy them. But then God talks about his judgment and his punishment. And he gives this imagery, starting in verse 10 to the end, of Israel being like a garden, right? And at first, when God found them, they were like grapes. They were beautiful grapes in the desert, or they were this early fruit on the fig tree, something you're really excited to see. But then, where does it say? It says, it now says, Ephraim is blighted, their root is withered, they yield no fruit. And it also says, I'm trying to find the passage, lost it. Okay. It talks about the treasures in verse 6. Talks about the treasures of silver will be taken over by briars, and thorns will overrun their tents. It gives this imagery of them trying to harvest good things from the earth or from the bad things that they're going to, but instead of harvesting good things, they just find weeds that have overrun it all. Like the roots have taken deep and destroyed everything. And the Lord is allowing this to happen. And what He's saying is, when they go to other gods looking for things that are going to give them fulfillment and pleasure, I'm not going to allow them to find it. They're not going to find it. In fact, I'm going to cut it off. I'm going to take away even the base pleasures that they're getting from these things, because these things cannot fulfill them. And as long as they go after these things, I'm going to rip away the benefits from it. I'm not even going to let them feel experience what they think is the good things from it. That way they come back to me. It's God judging people, and this is always what God's judgment is like. God's judgment is intended to draw sinners back to repentance. It's to draw those who are running away back to repentance. Not everyone will come back, and those who do not come back will experience complete judgment, which is terribly sad, but it's an invitation for all to turn back. This book of Hosea is the prophet crying out to the people of Israel and giving them this huge opportunity to repent and to turn back. And I am certain that some did. Otherwise, we wouldn't still have copies of this book today. But the nation as a whole did not. But God was still faithful. One of the things that was I was curious about as I was reading this is it seems pretty harsh when it says in verse 16, Ephraim is blighted, their root is withered, they yield no fruit. And then it says, even if they bear children, I will slay their cherished offspring. At first I was like, what is God talking about? Is he talking about like murdering babies? Um, but I did a little bit of reading on it, and this is just a continued uh, part of the same metaphor that he was using before, right? They're trying to get um, they're wanting the land. The land is the metaphor right now for like these idols that they're serving. They want the land to produce fruit for them, right? And children are often referred to as the fruit of the womb, right? They're wanting to bear some, to reap something from what they sow. And he's using this image of having children, right? And children were a huge deal, and they were like the sign of their own glory and their own honor. And for them to have children um, meant such big things. So God is just continuing this metaphor. It's like the things that you are demanding from this God, like children with this God, not real children, but like the product of being with this God, I'm not going to give you. The product with being with this idol, I'm not going to give you. I'm going to take it away. And so he's not talking about murdering babies. He's talking um, about Israel not getting what their hearts are going after, because what he knows that what their hearts are going after is going to destroy them, and he can't allow them to believe that it's good any longer. And he's calling them back to himself. Um, so anyway, I think that's encouraging to me in some ways, that the Lord just cares deeply about us and longs for us to find real joy, and we only find that in him. So I hope that Hosea has been encouraging you to know the Lord and to really find your joy and your contentment and your identity in Him and not in other things. All right, guys, those are my thoughts. Love to hear any questions you guys have. You guys can put them in the comments below. I will see you guys next time.